let's talk about it.
Hello and welcome back to Thicc Radio, the podcast where we talk about gaming, feedism, and everything in its orbit. I'm James.
And I'm Tim, so let's get into it.
Right, listeners, we're coming at you this week with yet another review of Ridiculosity. Look, in this particular instance, because as you may recall the last time, we discussed some short films that, in actual fact, we may have decided that we have changed some views on because they were insane.
Yes.
And because we viewed these on YouTube, in the process of reviewing, of course, YouTube gives you some suggestions, and it recommended some videos to us.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there was a series of video games titled SCP. Now, I've never played these. Tim, I believe you are aware of them. Is that right?
I was aware of them. Like, I've watched people play it on YouTube, but I have not played it myself.
Right. So, it's a game series in which, I don't know, it's a facility where a whole bunch of people are kept captive because of, like, weird experiments that are given weird names and numbers. And I don't know if these are like a part of the canon, but there's like this Wikipedia online where people seem to have submitted stories as like a Wikipedia format to kind of continue on with this game.
Mm-hmm.
And so people have made like animated YouTube videos talking through those stories. And we've reviewed 2 of those videos, and that's what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
So the first one is called The Adults SCP-1788. SCP Animation, which is produced by a YouTuber called TheRubber, and SCP-2611 Large and in Charge, which was produced by YouTuber Dr. Bob. So let's get into it.
I'm just going to say that for the sake of not making this too confusing, when we're talking about the adults, I'm going to say the one about the big guy. When we're talking about Large and in Charge, I'll say the one about the big girl, because that's a lot of numbers to try to remember.
Yeah, there's a lot with that. The big guy one and the big girl one. There we go. Lovely shorthand. So when we were watching the big guy one, we noted that the piece seemed to carry itself with a very whimsical, cartoonish air, which was kind of fun to kick things off with. I don't know about you. There was a slight part of me that maybe even felt hopeful. I was like,
well, that got shot in the ass, didn't it?
That it did, because almost immediately it became a narrative about pedophilia, which is just awful. Essentially, what is apparently meant to happen is that prepubescent humans are infected with whatever this number thing is, and we don't know how it happens, but then they are instantly transformed into morbidly obese, super tall, super bulky adults who prey on other prepubescents. And it's very weird because the majority of this video goes into this like anatomy thing, and apparently they have like an extra set of arms and extra organs and all of this weird stuff, right? Which, look, cool. It's meant to be weird. I get it. But obviously that's a pretty potent thing to put out there. Look, in your opinion, do you feel like this was a weird plot line to you?
Interestingly enough, I've kind of heard something similar to this before. Like, I remember, so when I was a teenager, I would read a lot of horror, and I read a short story by a man named Joe Lansdale. It is called The Fat Man, and it's in a collection of his short stories entitled Bumper Crop. And I remember it being a pretty disturbing story. It was about a obese man who lived on the end of a street in a neighborhood, and all the kids like knew the fat man lived there, and they would make fun of him and everything. But 2 kids pluck up the courage to try to like spy on him and see what he's doing. And you sort of come to discover that he's not really human, that he's some sort of, I don't know, monstrosity or alien or whatever it was. And well, he ends up eating one of the kids. Yeah. But I think the whole, like, when they were talking about the internal anatomy of the SCP and like the difference in the organs and all this other stuff, it kind of made me think about that short story. And then when it mentioned that they infect a prepubescent person and instantly become an adult, that sounded a lot like one of the books by Anne Rice in the Mayfair Witch trilogy about this particular creature known as the Taltos, like that goes from an infant to a human in just a couple of seconds. I mean, infant to a human, an infant to a full-grown human within a couple of seconds after birth. So, like
Interesting.
both those things, kind of, you know, when I was watching that thing, I was like, oh yeah, I feel like I've heard that before. Though I still think it's leaving me with sort of a bad taste in my mouth. I know it's a piece of fiction. I know that this is, nothing real, but like, it kind of creeps me out. So there was a segment where the SCP was under containment and was being interviewed, and didn't it say something along the lines of, "Well, you all still look like children. You're not done yet," as if to imply that a full-grown human was not actually full grown, that there was something stunted in our development and that we have to have our full potential unlocked
By this SCP process.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the narrative it leans on, but kind of bringing it back to the fat, I just find that a really interesting conflation. That they don't just say, oh, they grow up to become a normal adult.
Yeah.
They grow up to become an obese adult. Why obese? Why?
Well,
Why that?
I'll challenge you on this because we both watched The Sandman, and I have read the comics before. And one of the serial killers at the serial killer convention is a big chubby guy who goes after kids.
Hmm.
And like when watching that and when reading that way back when I did, I guess I didn't find anything out of the ordinary because that's what society has trained us is like, look out for that person because it's always going to be, the weirdo, the loner, the fat guy, the really tall guy, the one that seems socially awkward, that kind of shit.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe that's where the discomfort comes from. It's just that, again, it's that conflation of obesity with something not nice. When we talked about fat girls and feeders, it was the idea that feeders are inherently evil humans. When we watched Eater, it's that apparently you can break someone down and then the end result is cannibalism. Now it's
Mhm.
pedophilia, and I'm just like, what?
Yeah, there's really been nothing to inspire hope.
No. I mean, I'm just waiting for the next documentary where I have no doubt in my mind we will see the inherent link between obesity and bestiality. And then the
or
next,
or Satanism
or
or
necrophilia.
or
No,
necrophilia.
just honestly,
I mean, I know I shouldn't laugh at that, but it's just ridiculous the shit that they correlate. It's like, where does this come from? Other than the obvious, society doesn't like it.
I know. I know. So, listeners, if you know any pieces where obesity gets linked to necrophilia and bestiality, let us know at thiccradio@gmail.com and we'll complete our series of obesity linked to the true atrocities of humankind. But, anyways, do you feel like seeing repeated examples of that conflation is society's way of trying to create a new link? Like we're trying to demonize fat people in the same way that we've demonized queer people in the past?
I suppose it's possible. I mean, we could be reading into it too much, but where does all this, start? Like,
Where does it start?
um,
Where does it go?
yeah, where does it go exactly? So yeah, you could make that comparison. Um, I don't know if that's exactly what I got out of it, but
I mean, like I said, because it was cartoon, I wanted to get something more fun. And I will say there was a moment, because you mentioned the scene with the shock collar,
mhm.
the scientist is like, "What do I call you?" And he says, "Call me what you want, just don't call me late for supper." Like that inclusion of comedy, do you feel like that pushes the dial any closer to camp, or does it not really do a good enough job to make that happen?
I don't know if it can be called camp, to be honest, because it takes itself a bit seriously, and in fact, it's. I mean, I don't. It's almost cosmic horror, so and that always takes itself seriously. um, yeah, I don't think it can be considered camp. Camp doesn't usually leave you disturbed.
No, camp is meant to be a fun romp. That's why even though, as I'd explained to you when watching Mummy Dearest, like, yeah, there were moments of it that disturbed me because it seemed to present itself so seriously, I couldn't help but enjoy it because it was inherently camp.
Yeah.
Um, we did go into the comment section after this video, and most of the comments were kind of saying like, "Oh yeah, finally an SCP about Discord moderators." I'm not familiar
I
with Discord. Please explain.
I don't know because I don't I mean I'm on Discord. I'm a part of a couple of servers that are aimed at specific fetishes, but like I'm not a huge participant in Discord. So I don't know. I've never had problems with moderators, mostly because I don't engage. So I can't speak to any truth of that.
Mm. Fair dues. But listen, thank fuck that's the end of episode 1. Now, episode 2, the one with the large girl.
Yes.
Similarly, this plot does not specify like gaining or feedism as the impetus for the narrative. Much of the plot follows what could be described, honestly, as a very typical piece of like gainer fiction, right?
Oh yeah. I thought we were watching a porn.
It's how it seemed at the start. Because essentially, the plot, it's got the narrator who goes, she sits down and she doesn't know why she can't stop eating chips and cookies. And then she feels that thing again, and then she cannot help herself but pick up that tub of ice cream that she dropped and start eating it all over again. And she goes from being like 150 pounds to 500 pounds. It very salaciously describes how, she can't fit on the bicycle seat and wobbles as she walks.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that line was very clear. I mean, look, do you feel that the author, whoever penned that originally on this fake Wikipedia, shared in some gaining fetus fantasies with us?
I'd be pretty surprised if they didn't. Either they are a member or they know somebody who is, and they've had extensive conversations with that person. Because this was beat for beat, like, any gainer fiction that I've ever read, and regardless of gender.
Hmm. Um, so at the end of the piece, it says that the cause was a piece of sentient fat that has grafted onto her major organs and is like controlling her like a parasite.
Yes.
Um, I mean, is that a storyline that you've come across in Gain of Fiction?
Not so far, but wasn't there a Doctor Who episode where little fat blobs were sentient?
I was literally just thinking about that. Essentially, in the Doctor Who episode, they were taking these pills, which were meant to be miracle weight loss pills. But what
Yeah.
it was it was causing like the birth of celluloid creatures. So basically,
Uh-huh.
they would give them to the obese, and a single pound of fat they would lose every night. But what would happen is it would metastasize and like literally pull away from them.
Uh-huh.
Like, what's that thing when a cell subdivides? Mitosis?
Mitosis.
Like it was like mitosis, where it would just pull apart. It was a cute little fat thing going me 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 and like waddling
Hmm.
out. And I can't remember what the whole plot point behind that
I
was.
don't think I mean, I knew of those little things because pop culture, how can you not know? But I've never seen the episode.
Mm.
So, I'm not going to be able to compare them.
So
But in,
the meme was that there's a planet of creatures made purely of fat, and the way that they would work is that when they would have children, they would gestate on a moon that would orbit or a planet nearby.
mhm,
But that planet disappeared for some reason and their species was dying. So they tasked this woman who looked a lot like, do you remember Super Nanny?
yes.
So a woman who was meant to be that basically, who was running this corporation. But the
Okay.
premise was that she was trying to steal all the fat possible from humans to basically rebreed the next generation of these celluloid aliens.
Gotcha.
Seems to only result in one death, but kicks off this narrative of like planets disappearing and it's some kind of multiversal, I don't know.
Hmm.
Can barely remember. But it happened at the first episode where there was Donna. There was the Christmas special when she was in the wedding dress, but then there was the first
Hmm.
episode when she was the new companion, and it was the first episode, and it was her. And we love Catherine Tate.
Oh
So
yeah, that's right. That was Catherine Tate.
that was Catherine Tate. So similarly, we also visited the comment section after this video, and I've got to say, so this video came out mid 2022.
Hmm.
At time of recording, it has racked up nearly 2 million views. And what I found really interesting was how many comments were made by viewers who thought that being an out of control glutton was the scariest thing they'd ever seen.
Yeah.
So this SCP group, they don't just do stuff around that. They do stuff where it's like, alien, like things bursting through the chest, or, eating your bones from the inside out, or rotting flesh, or mutilated babies, like
Yeah.
all sorts of fucking weird shit, right?
Mhm.
But for people to have like seen all of that and gone, this woman became uncontrollably fat, scariest thing they'd ever seen, that really shocked me.
Yeah.
I mean, like, do you feel that that has like affected your idea of like normalcy of the conversation of weight gain for you?
Well, I suppose for a lot of people, yeah, it is like their worst nightmare because in watching this, I remember a conversation that we had here on the podcast, and I think it was with Rick about how some people perceive that if they begin to gain weight, they'll never be able to stop. They'll be like, I would just be too addicted. I'd
Yeah.
never be able to stop. I just keep growing and growing. And it kind of makes me wonder how many people have that sort of instinct or deep dark part of their mind that they never acknowledge, of they just that they would want to keep getting bigger, and maybe that's why this particular SCP terrifies them so much.
Hmm. I mean, we know from discussion on this podcast that obesity is something that a lot of people fear, and this is really what stems a lot of fat phobia. But it's just really interesting to me to actually see that, promoted so publicly and so like virulently. But then again, that's the privilege of not going and looking at shit like this SCP bullshit. I try to keep my content nice and fat positive and of good
Yeah,
age.
because you're not really one for horror, and this is very much like this is a very like HP Lovecraft style of horror.
Yeah, body horror to an extent, or at least
Yeah.
that's what obesity is being used as a catalyst for.
Mhm.
Like, yes, what is happening to the people is horrific because they are being like converted by parasites, but also the idea of becoming obese is a horror.
Yeah.
So, you can't help but notice things like that. Um, I do want to ask you, what do these YouTube videos have in common?
Well, they were both based off the SCP series, and they were animated in similar styles. They were animated by two different people. So, I
Hmm,
mean, so the fact that they were animated, the fact that they're both on YouTube based on the same thing, that's what they have in common. Oh, and they both involve largeness, like even though the one about the adults um doesn't have them actively gaining weight, in the story, they just sort of suddenly become obese. They have that in common too.
hmm. What do you feel like the creator's motivation was for creating these videos?
um well, I don't know if the people who created the videos are the same people who wrote the description of the SCP. They could be two different entities. So, the motivation would be to bring these stories about the SCPs to life. I don't know how many SCPs were listed in the game. I don't know how many there were, if there was like this infinite number or if it was a finite amount. I have no idea. But I would just think that I am fucking this up so badly. I'm talking in circles. I'm sorry. Let me start this over.
You're good.
Um, so I think the reason why they would produce these videos is to bring these descriptions of the SCPs to life. Um, Seems like this is a very passionate fan base, and it's probably just a project to get these writers their stories out there.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose that's another question. Like, ultimately, if they're just fans of a series creating something that mimics the essence of the series, can we really fault them for what they produce? I mean,
No,
I
I don't think so.
I vote yes personally because you're
Oh,
always
you do? Oh,
well, just because like you don't exist in a void. You always have control over what content you create,
mhm.
and so I think if someone has an idea of like, ooh, this seems pretty salacious and utilizes these themes and could tick a box, like, sure, but just because you could doesn't necessarily mean you should. I don't know. I don't feel like a fat person created this stuff, basically.
No, and I guess maybe that's why I'm being lenient with it, is because whoever wrote these descriptions probably I don't think they had malice intended. it was probably benial ignorance.
What do you feel? What did you like about these shorts?
And they were very well animated. And they were very distinct in their styles. Um, the voiceover work was really good. Um, yeah, I mean, I didn't care for the content, but it was well produced.
Yeah, the storytelling I thought was done quite well. I liked that it was cartoon. Like I say, when I first sat down to watch it all, I thought, hey ho, this could actually be something really cool and fun. And then it truly fucking wasn't. So, what did we dislike about these YouTube shorts?
I didn't like the comparing, being a large person to being a pedophile.
Yeah,
That I had a problem with.
that's a lot.
Um, yeah, so this is a big leap to make. And I didn't care for the sentient layer of fat that was controlling the woman's body.
Yeah. Look, you say it was a big leap. Fat people can't even jump that far. So, I think if they can't even make the jump, then we already know, it's
Yeah, yeah.
inappropriate. That work. Um, but what would you change about these if you could change anything?
Well, I don't know because I don't really. If these are, faithful descriptions and fictions that are in that universe, and it's not inappropriate for that universe, I don't know. Could you change anything? Like, because I just don't know this fandom.
Hmm.
So I wouldn't even really know how to change it, other than just completely rewrite it and leave out the pedophilia part in the one, and in the other one, leave out the whole against her will part.
Hmm. What would I change? I think in all honesty, I would keep the art styles the same and the narrative building I would keep the same. But
Mhm.
I think in terms of topic, if I could, I'd make it so that it was consensual gaming and that it wasn't underage people and that it was all above board and positive and because at the very least if they painted it so that this woman was being seduced to enjoy her weight gain, like that
Mhm.
wouldn't be so bad. That would almost have a horror element of you don't even know that you've been tricked, but now you love it, and so now you can't get out of it. Like I could see the porn elements from that. But,
Yeah,
you know,
but it
the,
wouldn't be very in line with like what scares people today. Like it wouldn't be very frightening.
so I suppose that's the answer. It was probably formatted with pedophilia and all this non-con stuff and all this like negativity so that it falls in line with cultural views. What culture believes obesity to be, which is representative of something truly awful.
Yeah.
So, anywho, time for our reviews, Timbo. So, for the first one, the Adults SCP-1788 SCP Animation, which involved the large men.
I think I gave that one a 5 out of 10. I was kind of generous with it because of the art style, the presentation. I, yeah, I would say a 5.
Okay. I gave it a 0. I just think any conflation of that nature is just not on. So, you know, not a fan. But the second piece, SCP-3611, large and in charge with the fat girl. What would you give that out of 10?
I'll give that one a 4 because again, it was well done, well animated, the voice work was really good. So those things give it at least 4 points.
Okay. I actually gave that one a 5 because ultimately, aside from those couple of key moments, it was just fat porn. And as much as I'm not necessarily female attracted that much, I can still appreciate some good authorship. And
Yeah.
obviously have implanted myself in the scenario of being the quote unquote unwilling being fattened up countless times. So I can always appreciate a circle back to the story.
Like you'd be hauled into the doctor's office, like you have a sentient patch of fat in your stomach and it's controlling you, and you'd be like, "Well, where have you been all my life?"
I would be so offended. I'd be like, "Are you fucking kidding me? You have a lot to answer for. I have been stuck at around 200, 210 for far too long. Get your shit together and make me fucking huge." And the doctor's just sat there like, "What is going on?" Ugh. But
Containment breach, containment breach.
well, listen. That's a wrap for now here on Thicc Radio. Please remember to like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave us a good review. If you liked this episode, the podcast, or just us in general, share it with your friends and encourage them to tune in. You can find me on Instagram and beefyfrat at stannnum.
And you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, and BeefyFrat at ThiccMouse. You can also look us up on TikTok at Thicc Radio or at our website at www.podpage.com/ThiccRadio. If you want to submit a voice note, you can reach us at anchor.fm/ThiccRadio/message. And if you have any questions or ideas for episodes, you can reach us at thethiccradio@gmail.com. So until next time, bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Patreon and Enter app podcast produced by Stan and Thicc Mouse.
Mixed and mastered by Stannnum.
Our artwork is provided by Lokitu.
Our theme song is provided by BlueSky.